Hi, I'm Eve Samples. I'm Opinion and Engagement Editor with the USA Today Network Florida, here with Isadora Rangel of Florida Today. We are outside the Adrienne Arsht Center on Wednesday night, the night of the first Democratic debates. This is really kind of the official kickoff of the 2020 presidential election season. So we're here to tell you a little bit about what's going on behind us and also what we saw today. We spent the day in Miami. We're going to talk about some of the context in terms of what Florida voters want this election season. First, very important, let's tell you who is on the stage tonight because, as you are probably aware, there are so many Democratic candidates that they had to divide them between two nights. So 10 will go tonight, Wednesday, 10 will go tomorrow night, Thursday. I'm going to tell you the 10 tonight, right now. Julian Castro, he's the former HUD secretary. Cory Booker, New Jersey senator. Elizabeth Warren, Massachusetts senator. Amy Klobuchar, Minnesota senator. Tulsi Gabbard, Hawaii representative. Also Tim Ryan, Ohio representative. Bill de Blasio, New York City mayor. Beto O'Rourke, former Texas representative. John Delaney, former Maryland congressman. And Jay Inslee, the Washington governor. So it's a mouthful just talking about all of the candidates on stage just tonight, night one. Isadora is going to tell you a bit about how they qualified.
I know it's a mountain. Now you can take a breath from those 10 names. So like I said, there are 20 people who are going to be participating in the debates over 2 nights. And the DNC had to establish, obviously, some criteria as to know how candidates qualify. So the people that you're seeing in these 2 debates, they had to get donations from 65,000 people from 20 states, or at least 1% of support in three polls identified by the DNC. But then we also go into the format on how the candidates are split between the 2 nights. If you remember in 2016, when we had, I believe, 17 candidates in the Republican primary, the way that the RNC did it was you had sort of a debate with the top tier candidates, and you had sort of the kids table debate with the ones that were, ranked lower than the other ones. So the DNC, I think, was trying to be more inclusive, and the way they did it, they spread out candidates between those 2 nights, regardless of where they sit in the polls. So you see top tier candidates on stage tonight with some of the lower tier candidates. So Elizabeth Warren is actually the only candidate that's ranked, among the 4 top ones in the polls. And I think the coverage that we've been seeing, that this is her chance to kind of differentiate from the pack and stand out, but it also gives the opportunity for the lower tier candidates to really make a mark and make themselves known, because I was talking to voters today, Eve, and a lot of them don't know who all the candidates are, and even as journalists, it's been hard to keep track of all of them. So this is, I think, in my opinion, a chance to get to know the candidates, and maybe we see some of the lower ranked candidates who might, maybe climb up in the polls a little bit. But Warren is kind of the top dog, and we also have Booker and O'Rourke. We'll see how they did tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. So we as journalists are trying to be very cognizant about giving equal time to all the candidates at this stage in the game. There's polling out there, of course, and as Isadora mentioned, Elizabeth Warren is at the top of that. Joe Biden tomorrow night is at the top of the polls overall. But we really want to listen impartially and with an open mind to deliver coverage to you, especially in terms of what matters to Florida voters. So I spent my day in North Miami, which happens to be my hometown, and Isadora was at Florida International University. We were talking to voters about what matters to them. North Miami an area with a large Haitian American population. So I spoke to one local Democrat who has been very active with Caribbean American voters. And, she really almost didn't want to watch tonight, and she wasn't sure she would. And then just a few minutes ago, I saw her out here. She ended up coming down to a watch party outside of the debate theater here, and in the end, she couldn't resist. But, this is a long haul, 18 months of campaigning, of listening to candidates, and of trying to understand their platforms. So we want to keep an open mind, especially at this early stage in the game. Personally, I want to try not to hone in too much at all, really, on bickering. I'm sure some candidates will try to get some zingers in, but the issues I'm personally listening for tonight are climate change, our environment, discharges from Lake Okeechobee and Everglades restoration are a perennial issue in Florida, and the federal government certainly has a role to play in that, so I'll be listening for that. What about you, Isadora?
I'm mostly interested in healthcare. I think it's something that affects everyone, and you see even most voters, when you ask the top issues, usually economy, but healthcare is pretty high up there. Beyond healthcare, I spoke with young voters, and I went to FIU, my alma mater, like you said. And a lot of the young folks are not too familiar with who's running, but the one thing that I heard from multiple people is that they're really looking for people who are going to do something about, student loan forgiveness or helping them pay for school. Obviously, they are the demographics for that, and you have seen some of the candidates have already released plans to forgive student debt. So it seems to me that's a very clear attempt to cater to young voters. But also, I think the economy and jobs and income inequality is something that I think is a big concern for.
The people I talked to in Miami today were kind of divided. Some of them wanted kind of a candidate who would really inspire enthusiasm, shake things up, disrupt the system, and then others were much more pragmatic about it. They tended to be kind of the Biden supporters. So it'll be interesting to see how tonight's debates change things. So reminder, we're here in Miami outside the Arch Center, where the first night of Democratic debates are about to happen. They start at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. They'll last about 2 hours. And we will be covering it from outside the theater. Isadora and I, we have a whole team of USA Today Network Florida reporters covering around the state and actually outside of the state as well. We'll be watching, analyzing different issues, keeping you up to date.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm going to be watching for, not just in the next couple of nights, but it is whether our Democrats really interested in the electability aspect of all the candidates. That's something that, a lot of voters will say they just want someone who's going to be Donald Trump. But I think that is kind of the underlying story in the Democratic primary is where is the heart of Democrats? They're looking for someone who's going to disrupt the system, much like Donald Trump did, or they're looking for someone, they to call establishment, who is going to work from within the system to make incremental changes that are not going to be, Medicare for all or the things that are really far-reaching. So I'm interested to see, you look at the polls, it is very early to say whether that's an indication of what's really going to happen when people actually vote. But it seems that they are looking for the guy who's going to be Donald Trump and cater to those Obama-Trump voters who are the people who voted for Obama or were Democratic their whole lives and switched to Trump, or they're really going to go for more of the rainbow coalition and the minorities and really going to cater to a wider voter segment. So I think that's going to be very interesting to see where the country is. This is a historic time in the history of the United States and the world, so I can't wait for 2020. I wish we were in November. So
yeah, we have 18 months to go and a long road ahead of us. I was talking to one of the council members of the city of North Miami today about this election. It's a nonpartisan office, but he's a Democrat, and he really felt like we're not going to have another Obama-type candidate this cycle where you have extreme enthusiasm, really high voter turnout. He thinks that's a once-a-generation type of candidate. So even this early on, it was interesting to hear that out of these 20, he really didn't feel like we would get that out of anyone. That said, I did speak to some young voters today who mentioned Elizabeth Warren. So as you mentioned earlier, I do think she's the one to watch tonight. I also want to talk a little bit about, and I'm going to skip to my notes here, a survey that we did, the USA Today Network Florida, that we did earlier this month. We asked you to tell us what you want from our coverage in 2020, and part of that survey was a question that was, what would you tell the 2020 candidates if you could tell them one thing about Florida in particular? So I'm going to share just a few of those responses with you. We heard that we have a serious water quality crisis, so that's something the candidates should know. Also, I liked this one a lot. We're in stone crabs, alligators, and stories about people doing stupid things. Florida's a microcosm of America and a good test lab for how your solutions could play out across the nation. I think that's very well put because we're standing here in Miami tonight. We have sister papers in Pensacola and Tallahassee, and those are very different demographics, also diverse in their own ways, but different. So you can really use tonight on stage and see how Florida reacts and get maybe an inkling of how that might play on the broader stage in 2020. Being covered by water on all three coasts is very vulnerable. And this might get to the heart of the 2020 election and all elections. People vote their pocketbook. So we have a good economy now, and I think it's a real challenge for all of these 20 Democrats to prove how they would keep the economy strong and improve it.
Yeah, definitely the economy, and I think that's Trump's argument, right? And it was very interesting. I was talking to a young voter today, and he's 24, and he told me unless Trump does something really bad and really wrong, then I'm gonna go vote for him because he wants more opportunities because he sees the economy doing better. So I wonder. Obviously, that's just one person, but if we can expand that to different, you know, voter segments, but honestly, after 2016, I'm out of the business of trying to predict things, and I think we all should be. It's going to be very interesting. I'm always wondering if Democrats go with someone like Joe Biden, maybe he appeals to the people who might have voted for Trump but are looking for something else. But then, you have the more progressive voters who might not be enthusiastic about him like they were about Obama. And then there's the flip side versus if you nominate a very progressive person who doesn't appeal to the middle of the road voters. It's going to be very interesting to see where the Democrats land at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I too am out of the business of predicting, not really were, but I think polls can be misleading this early on, so we're keeping an open mind. We're down here covering, and I should say too that our journalists covered Trump's re-election campaign kickoff just last week in Orlando. It's no coincidence that all of these candidates in 2020 are choosing Florida to launch this campaign cycle. We're really an important state, a bellwether state, some say. Arguably a swing state. Democrats and Republicans are narrowly divided. Of course, Republicans control state politics, we'll be answering any questions and providing some context. Isadora and I also will be filing columns, hers about young voters, mine about local voters in North Miami. So thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
I know I'm hot. I'm sweating. How long do we go?